All right, guys, I got a 5R55S transmission here. Typically fits 02 to 2010 Explorer, also called the 5R55W, which was like 02 to 03. 04 and newer had a different Overdrive Planet setup in it with a different sun gear count, but commonly used 02 to 2010. It has no dipstick on it. It's a 5-speed automatic with lockup. Some of their common big issues is the servo bores wear in the case. This case I already have reamed and sleeved with the Northland bushing set. I'm gonna show you over here the kit that we have. It's got the bushings, already got the holes in them so you don't have to drill them like the old school ones. It's got a nice little setup that you put in there, ream them out. Typically ream them before we wash the case so it's all clean like this, all painted. Kind of got some of the parts set out here. It's kind of actually my first video. I've worked in the industry since I was 16, 25 years now. So I hope to do some more videos. I got to get some better equipment, but just thought I'd do this on a whim today on a Sunday. Come in early to knock some stuff out. Got the unit all washed up there. So yeah, let's see how it goes. All right, guys, gonna start here. Got the case sideways. Got your low band here. Gonna put the low band in there. Gonna lift up on that anchor for it. When it's in there, you can kind of wiggle it, center it a bit. Start with the case bearing in the bottom. This one's always forgotten, I've seen on guys who've never taken them apart. Lose them in the parts washer. But this bearing goes and recesses down in the inner spray grease in the bottom of the case. Get that in there. I'm just gonna kind of breeze through this video, kind of show you a couple things, but low sprag, when you put it in, should turn to the right and lock to the left. Put a little lube around it there. See, spins to the right and then locks if you go the other way. You can also push on your band, make sure you got it all indexed okay. Next, we got our low ring gear. It does take a sealing ring on it. You got your kit laid out. Always take these and kind of bend them in a little bit so that they hug the part they're supposed to go on. You don't cut them when you put them in. Just put a little lube on. I use 90 weight. Some guys use a mix of 90 weight, ATF. Right here. Another Torrington bearing. Put it on there. So, before I put that in, we get our output shaft and our part gear. Also has a tone wheel on it for the rear speed sensor. Make sure you don't doink these in the machine, drop them on the ground, or you'll have a bad speed reading or a code you're trying to track down. Right here, case washer. Goes in the back of the case there. Put a little lube on this. At the back of the case. Then you can put the ring gear in there. And now you're ready for the snap ring for the output shaft here. Let's get it ready on the tool. I want to hold the output shaft. Get her tanged in. Usually when she's in, you get a little bit of in and out play. Just make sure it's clicked in all the way. Don't need a snap ring blowing off. This is kind of a lube slinger here that goes over the snap ring. And then what you got to do is kind of come in with your fingernail and lift up on the low sprag, spin it, pull it forward, and then you get your low planet. Low planet. Typically these don't go bad, but always spin them. See if there's got any side-to-side wobble. See how the planet washers look. They're gonna have a little bit of play. in and out. You just don't want them to spin or actually rock and wobble side to side. But that looks good. Takes another bearing here. Usually the easiest thing to do when you tear this stuff apart, put all your bearings in a hook in order so you can't really mess them up till you get comfortable with it. Once you get good at it, you can throw it in a box and you know where everything went. Now you kind of finesse, slightly get the planet in there till it goes over the tangs of the sprag. Sometimes you got to take a pick, pull that planet forward, or the low sprag forward, so it gives you room to get the snap ring for the low planet in place. So you take your snap ring, you get her in there. So the back end's kind of assembled there. Typically what I'll do is put on the park linkage. So on the back plate here, there's a seal you can replace and a new gasket. You also got to get your part pieces in place, which can seem confusing if you've never dealt with part gear or transmission. But you'll see this lug right here needs to go hit the part gear. This is the return spring for it. So just like that, you got the spring right there anchored. So this will, when the lever goes in and hits park, hit the park linkage, park pulse slides there, but it's got to be able to return, so when it's out of park it doesn't drag against the park gear. I usually use green assembly lube. Right now I got some Transshell Gold. You can honestly just go to your store and get Vaseline. We actually do that when our supplier's been out of it. Okay. So, line the park rod up. Okay, now you're all lined up there. So now you want to go through and grab your bolts to bolt this plate on. Try to go through this as quick as I can. These are actually decent transmission, but aside from those servo bores wearing, typically the common codes will be like a 2nd and 5th gear ratio code when this overdrive servo piston either tears the rubber molded piston. Intermediate servo can do that too, but they wear those bores and then it'll kind of cock and side load and eat that servo piston up. When the overdrive band goes, cause no 2nd, no 5th. A lot of times I'll get people call and say, AutoZone said I have a bad shift solenoid, because you'll get shift solenoid performance codes, stuck on, stuck off, and then the mechanical ratio fault codes, and they think it needs a solenoid pack, which solenoid packs do go bad sometimes. They have 3 separate pressure control solenoids in them, but the ratio codes are typically a telltale of an internal issue. You can also drive it with the scanner, see when the shift command comes. Say if it goes command 2nd gear, it doesn't make the shift. You know, you got an internal issue with it. But a lot of vehicles are like that anymore. The definition may say solenoid, but it could be a mechanical problem. So you kind of have to see the definition, performance, stuck on, stuck off. Typically mechanical, but just a few tips there. Don't have the torque specs out. I've done this a bunch of times, so most mechanics kind of go by feel once you've done it enough. So now you have your park in place. You can test it. Push it forward. Should lock. Release it. Holds park. So check it now. You can also check it when you're done. Now you can see down in the case there, we're ready for our sun gear and sun gear. It's got this spacer right here where that Torrington bearing recesses, so that goes down there. Teeth look good on this sun gear. A lot of times these sun shells can get hogged out, knocked out pretty good. This one looks really good. This one actually didn't have a tranny problem. I had a different issue on the vehicle, but we got the core here to build from another shop. Front planetary. Again, can look if those washers wear. They'll have a little bit of side-to-side movement up and down, but you don't want it to wobble like it has a bad pin. There's little roller needle bearings inside of there. This Torrington bearing in here, you have to be really careful with it. It can fall apart and all the needles will come out of it. So usually kind of feel it, make sure it feels smooth. When I disassemble it, I put it aside so it doesn't fall apart and cause another issue because those bearings are hard to find. I believe you can use an RE4 bearing on them we've done in the past, but now you're up to the planet. Right here, we got the forward ring gear. This snap ring is also prone to breaking on sometimes on the 5R55S and W. I believe Transco or Superior makes a heavy duty snap ring for that. You also want to take this and see about the spline play right there. That's normal, that feels good. So we got a couple more bearings here. You got the bearing that goes on the underside there. Get her on there. We also have this brass washer. Then we have this bigger Torrington bearing that your front forward drum's gonna sit on. So at this time, I'll go ahead and put in the intermediate servo piston. You can't put the overdrive servo piston in yet or you won't be able to get the center support in. So I always kind of grease up the bore a little bit with some grease. Got the cover ready, got my new O-ring for it. Always kind of look at inside of here, make sure nothing's scratched up. Again, these pistons are huge about tearing, so when those bores in the case wear, this pin can kind of side load and then tear the rubber. I've also seen the back end of these break out, so they'll just blow the back end out. But that looks good. I'm gonna put a little lube on there. You can also hold these holes and try to pull. It won't want to come out. Make sure it's holding tight in there. Don't forget your spring that goes on there. So always kind of lube everything up real good. Transmissions, you do everything right and you can still have a parts problem, assembly error, bad torque converter, crappy guy install it who stacks the pump or doesn't flush the cooler. It's a brutal industry, freaking brutal. So all we can do every time, do our best on the rebuild, give the install guys as much tips. We do a lot of wholesale here, so we deal with a lot of shops that they want to make money putting in transmissions, but they may not know how. Ugh. So these go in really tight. Take a lot of force here with my hammer handle. You can also tap the cover in with a mallet. You just don't want to get too aggressive with it. It's aluminum. Typically, another way to tell if it's a 5R55S I've found, they have aluminum covers on them. The 5R55W is a steel cover. So another difference there on the outside you can tell. Again, we get a lot of units brought in outside of the vehicle, so we may not see the vehicle, any symptoms codes, so you know you have to be Have to be good on the rebuild side of it the best you can. Okay, so that's in there. Time for the forward drum here. There's a couple sealing rings here. Take and throw those old ones away. Replace those. So, got your new sealing rings on there. Got another Torrington bearing on the top of the drum right here. That on there. Then you have your forward piston here. This is another bonded rubber one. So make sure it's not scratched up or the rubber's soft, or you just replace it. Depending on what your kit has, if you're in here on a Sunday and you don't have parts available all the time. That piston pushes in easy. You hear the air go through. Always got to make sure these feed and bleed, these check balls are clear. Nothing sticky in there. And you got your return spring, snap ring, which you need a foot press to do these, or some kind of tools. I've seen people have tools that they can kind of use on their bench, but a foot press, sorry it's not in the video, it's the way to go. So you got that. All right. Forward drum, forward clutches here. It's good to pre-soak them. These ones have directional grooves on them, so kind of get the grooves going the right way. Okay, it's in there. Snap ring. It's a little bit sloppy clearance. I don't have the spec handy exactly. Probably 50 thou. So we'll flip it over, lube that bearing, sealing rings. Now get your direct drum ready. So this drum forward clutch comes on right when you put it in drive. Direct drum, typically third gear. Have to look at the clutch application chart. Got your piston here, have to put your lip seals on it. These ones you don't really need a tool on, you kind of just get them lubed up and twist and they go right in. Got to line up all these little springs back in here. Return springs. Okay, and then for your foot press, when you put this back on, I made a nice little tool, because otherwise when you have your arm, your feet or your foot press, you can kind of bend that. So put that over it. Got our snap ring here. We'll put it in. Okay, in all the way. Direct clutches. Same thing, they have directional grooves on them. Not many transmissions do that, but Ford seem to like to do it on these. Just kind of smack it on the bench. Clearance. Lube up right here. Where your sealing rings for your center support go. Work this down all the way. And you got your other big bearing here for the center support. So what you can do next, take your center support. Be careful of these little, see, lost a little roller bearing there. But there's 2 sealing rings that go on there. So you want to get those. Same thing, I kind of twist them a little bit so they'll hug the part they're going on. So there you got your new sealing rings on there. Also look in here for any wear from the sealing rings of the forward drum, any ring grooves, ring cut they call it. So lube this up really good. And then here next we're going to air check the forward and direct clutch. So put that over there. You can use your air blower, the rubber tip here. Great air checks. You're going to get a little hissing there because they have a bleed orifice. Air check's good. So now I take a pair of snap ring pliers. These snap-on ones are nice, heavy duty. I lock the transmission in park. It will help to drop the splines of the forward clutch down. Actually, before I do that, I also like to take your band anchor for the servo side, which goes this way. And I take some grease, gotta hold it in place there. Next, we're gonna put this drum in. So we're gonna get some green grease. That gold stuff doesn't hold the anchor very well. So now she's out of the way. I go put this back in. Usually you can spin around the side here. Look at the witness marks on the sun shell to know it's down all the way. Usually get a nice solid sound when you kind of lift up and down on it. Then you got your band. Always make sure these look good. These can kind of get peeled over too, I've seen, from the band anchor. So it's kind of the pain in the butt part. You gotta hold your band. Get your strut into place there. Then put this one in. The tiny side goes upward. This one you can go in through the hole in the case. Get her lined up there. Wow, these coming off. Typically these adjusting nuts don't come off very easy because there's so much rust on the outside. Usually I'd wire wheel this. I'm just trying to do this quick to show you here for the video. So typically get your band, the bolt in here for the band. You kind of want to bring it to where you don't want to snug it up. You want to leave it loose so that the drum can relax there. So that you can put your center support in next. This part, you kind of got to finesse it in there. And we're down all the way. There's a bolt that goes in here. Okay. So we got the bolt in there for our center support. Now I put the snap ring in for the center support. It's got a taper on it that goes upward. See, it's recessed all the way. I take now, tighten the bolt. Snug it up with a speed handle. Don't have to reef it tight. So then you can also take it out apart, back in, Lift it up. Freewheels one way, tension the other. If it's locked one way, you probably have something not down all the way. All right, now we get to some of the more big issues with the unit. The overdrive sprag. These sprags are known to roll. They cause no reverse. Other problems, they'll damage the overdrive planet. These are also known to wear the washers really bad. You'll usually see a pile of planet washer on top of the valve body there. There's also a Torrington bearing that goes in here that people forget, and they'll wash them, falls out in the washer, you lose it. You gotta kind of lift it up, let the pinions relax, get it back in there. There's another Torrington that goes on top here. Sometimes those get pitted, so you gotta look at that. Lube this up. See, turns one way, locks the other. Again, be careful with this tone ring right here. You don't want to drop it, damage it in the parts washer. Affect the reading of that speed sensor. Almost forgot. One more Torrington. There's a lot of Torringtons in this unit. Put her in there. Freewheels one way, tension the other. Now it's time for your overdrive sun gear. This is another differentiator of the S model. 38 tooth here. I believe the early model's 24, almost like an A4LD. I believe it's the same sun gear. You have this star washer here. Depending how your witness marks are, see how it goes, or put it in the drum. You'll see which way it goes. Just put your sun gear in there. Then I've already assembled the overdrive drum. There we go. This one's a little tricky to feel like it's down all the way. You'll go to bolt in the pump and it doesn't feel like it's down. So usually put that. Put the shaft in there. Wiggle it real good. Make sure it feels down. Okay. Overdrive servo piston. Same deal. Put a little grease in the bore. Anything you can help on assembly to not tear something. Return spring. Move this up real good. Here we kind of push it, it retracts. Now I know there's companies that make servos that have O-rings on them that people can try to replace in the vehicle. I've never used them. I see people do that stuff when there's already a problem and it's too late to fix it. So we've typically just reamed the case, gone through the tranny. We have to build stuff where we guarantee it. We can't just spend 5 hours trying something and then if it doesn't fix it, the customer's not happy. So usually a customer's not happy to be here anyway because they don't want to buy a transmission, but ultimately we have to do the best we can to kind of limit our time with it. No one likes being buried on a car for a week because no good deed goes unpunished. Try to help somebody out and it ends up costing you money. Okay, overdrive servo piston in there. We're gonna put our anchor just like the intermediate one up here. Hug it against the case there. Same thing. This band. Get it hooked in there. And this one, the small side upward. This one's a little trickier to finagle in there, but if you're smooth, you get it just like that. Otherwise, use some long needle nose to kind of put her in there. This one's a little rustier. Kind of a pain to get the old adjusting nuts off of there, but you got to replace them. They'll come in your kit. There's kind of a grommet seal right here underneath it because they can leak through the bolt. Again, you want to wire wheel the end of this to make your new nut go on there smooth. We'll do our final band adjustments at the end. We typically tighten them up and do 1.5 turns out. I believe the spec is 2 turns, but we found they clean up the shifts a little bit when you do 1.5 turns. We do the same on A4LDs for years, 5R55Es. So here you can make some alignment pins. You just take some old bolts, sand them down. Get your pump gasket ready. Lay it in there. And we'll get onto the pump here. All right, so down to one of the critical things of any transmission, the pump generates pressure. But I will show you a couple things on this tranny that's common. I have it kind of pre-assembled a little bit. So I got the pump washer on there, sealing rings, lockup sealing ring here. It's a solid ring. So you can kind of basically finagle it over here. Then you kind of push it back into shape. I put 90 weight, some lube on there. I have a alignment tool for the pump, but before I put the pump together, I use this to size that ring because it has a chamfer in there. Just like that. Spin it, pull it off, and that's all sized there. Really critical. You get a fresh ring in there, size it correctly or you will not have lockup. You can see this stator's a little scored up from prior converter failure. Make sure there's no scoring in the crescent there of the pump. That looks good. It's your pump gears here. So these have an O-ring that goes on the inner pump gear. Typically it'll come off in the wash. You want to put a new one in there. Kind of recesses accordingly. Sorry if I'm not getting in the picture on all these videos. Alright guys, phone kind of glitched out, got a little ahead there, but we got the pump assembled. We use the alignment tool, the Sonic's flow control valve, 56200-03K. These are known to stick. Always replace it. Sonic's makes amazing products. We also use an H gauge to check for clearance for putting the pump down. So you make sure all of your stuff's down all the way before you put the pump in. When you'll know it's down all the way when the pump's bolted in, this shaft should move both ways. If it doesn't spin or it only turns one way, something is not down, typically in the overdrive drum assembly there. So now we can kind of turn it this way. Again, we'll do those final band adjustments when we're all done, but usually tighten it all the way, back it off 1.5 turns, tighten the jam nut, check park again, check everything, make sure